Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is pin Hyper-V to my taskbar. I'm going to create a virtual switch that is internal, which means it'll create a virtual switch and create a virtual network card on my real machine and attach it to that virtual switch. I'm going to call it private. Now I'm going to open up PowerShell and turn on NAT on that virtual switch. New NAT internal IP interface address prefix will be 172.16.0.0/16, and the name will be private. So right now, I'm going to make my real machine a NAT router. It's done. Exit out of this. Do you guys want me to just pull up that real quick?
Yes.
New NAT internal dash name. I'm going to call it private. I'm not hitting enter because I already did it. So I'm going to create a new virtual machine. I'm going to create the hard disk first, so I have a pre-provisioned hard disk. New VHD, a differencing disk. I'm going to call it DC1. Wrong class. Based on server 2016. Now I'm going to create a new virtual machine to put in that disk in. I'm also calling it DC1. I'm going to connect that to my private switch and put that existing disk in. I'm going to start the virtual machine.
Is 180 true boot?
I'm just waiting for it to boot. Actually, while I'm waiting for that to boot, I'm going to create a new hard disk called DC2.
Still generation 2?
Yep. I'm not going to boot it yet just so DC1 doesn't take time.
Did you use the same virtual disk?
No, I created a new differencing disk based on the same parent disk. Oh, I skipped one step, guys. On my virtual NIC, on my real machine, I need to give it an IP. So for this virtual NIC, I'm going to give it the first IP. This is on the virtual Ethernet one attached to the private switch. Okay. That virtual network card is going to be my gateway for my entire network. Just to be more efficient, I'm going to now boot up DC2. Okay, so like always, first thing I'm going to do is configure my NIC. It's going to have the next available IP, which is 2. The gateway is the IP on my real machine, my NAT router. And my 2 upstream DNS servers are the school's DNS servers. .172.16.0.2, the gateway is 0.1, and the DNS is 10, 13, 2.5, and 2.7. This will be DC1. I'm going to try to pull something up on Google. Okay, so guys, here's a diagram for Active Directory, an Active Directory forest. A forest is a collection of trees. Here is one tree, here is another tree. What makes this tree a tree, and this one a different one?
Different domain.
Right, the child domains is appended to the name of the parent domain. If the name is contiguous, that means it's a tree. If it's a new namespace, that means it's a new tree. So this is one tree, this is one tree. Now, this right here is one domain. The first domain in the forest, the name of that domain is also the name of that tree and the name of the forest as well. And that domain has two special groups in it that I'll show you. From this diagram, can you tell me how many domain controllers are in that domain? No. Don't think of your domain controller as your domain. Your domain controller is just a tool to manipulate your domain. A domain controller is something you can touch. Your domain is not something you can touch. The term domain is not Microsoft's, is not the DNS domain name term. In this sense, it is more of a security context. If a computer is joined to your domain, or if a user is part of your domain, you can control that user. That's the term domain in this case means that's your area that you control. That's your security context. So what we're going to do is create a new forest, a new tree, and a new domain with a new domain controller. So I'm going to install the Active Directory software on this machine. Active Directory Domain Services, and just walk through the wizard. While that's going on, I'm going to create DC3. And DC4. Sorry, I'm still on DC3. Okay, I'm back on DC1. Now I'm going to promote this to a domain controller. So if my domain already existed, which means my tree already existed and my force already existed, I would just be adding another domain controller to an existing domain. And rarely do you want to have a domain with only one domain controller. If that goes down, no one would be able to sign in. So for redundancy purposes, you should have multiple domain controllers. I could add a new domain to my existing forest. That could be a new child domain or a new tree domain. In this case, I'm going to create a new forest, which means I'm creating a new tree and a new domain. And I'm going to call it contoso.com. It's going to install DNS for me. It's going to install a global catalog for me. I'll go into what this global catalog is in a minute. It's kind of important to know what that is. Internal, yes.
It's internal, right?
It's internal. Remember, the difference between an external switch and an internal switch is an external switch, everything is funneled through the switch, and virtual machines can access the real network directly. With an internal switch, the virtual machines can access the switch, and the real machine can access the switch. And at that point, if you want the virtual machine to access the network, they have to go through the real machine. They're not accessing the network directly. Through that virtual NIC on the real machine that's been turned into a NAT router.
Makes sense.
A private switch All the virtual machines can connect to it, but the real machine cannot. So I'm using our standard password. Right now, guys, it's trying to create this delegation, meaning it's looking to the DNS servers I put on my DNS client 10.13.2.5 and 2.7. It's trying to go and create the Active Directory domain contoso.com there. But the only problem is my user account doesn't allow them to do it. So they're getting denied. So they're giving you this error saying, we contacted that DNS server that you listed. We're unauthorized to create the domain, so we'll do it on this local machine. So they're going to configure my DNS for me on this local machine. There's an issue with it with 2016. I didn't have with 2012. I'll go into it. Even though it's supposed to do the delegation, half the time it doesn't. I don't know why. So we're just going to manually create the delegation, which is a good exercise in and of itself. Okay, now it's going to create 3 folders. My Active Directory database, my log files, and I'll go into what that is, and my sysfile folder. Basically, my sysfile folder is where all my policies are going to be stored. All my DCs will have a copy of it. So when your client boots up and it's joined to the domain, it automatically goes to the sysfile folder and downloads any policies that are there. The database folder is just that, my Active Directory database. When I create a new object, a new computer account, a new GPO, a new user account, I don't change the database directly. It's not safe to do so, because the database could be in the middle of replicating to another server. What I do is I change the transaction logs. So when I make a change, it updates the transaction logs. When it's safe to do so, Active Directory will then update the database. Once the database has been updated, it will then update the databases on all of the other domain controllers. So if I create a new user account, I'm going to connect to one Active Directory domain controller. And I'll make the changes on that one log file. So the log files that are on this DC are unique to this DC. If this DC crashes and there's anything in that log file, I've lost that. So if I created a new user account and it's only in the log file, it hasn't been updated in the database, and I crash this machine and I can't recover it, I've lost all that stuff. If you click on this link, Microsoft will tell you, you should put this and this on separate partitions on, even separate hard disk on your computer. No one ever does, but when you take that exam, yes, they're on different partitions, different hard disks. A review of everything I've just said. We could create a PowerShell script from this, give it to a non-tech individual, send them across to another, to a remote site, and they can create another domain controller based on this. What we're really doing by running this is just creating a PowerShell script, and then it runs a script for us. We could just manually just run the PowerShell script ourselves and save some time. Okay, guys, you know how long this takes? Let's make this your first break. This is going to take a while.
Professor.
Yes.
It's actually not that hard. That night, night here, all I did was like,
My real machine. Real Nick. virtual
You know how
NIC,
like you do it once, you do it the second time.
virtual switch,
Yeah, dude, I did like, I did a bunch of quizzes. at
Virtual
Harvard,
machine.
And I just did like 4 more than I got, and then I did the I clutched it.
this is a NAT
Pretty
router.
close to it.
So this is 172.16.0.1. This is 172.16.0.2. So if this wants to get to the internet, it goes through the switch to the virtual NIC on the real machine.
All of it. Like,
That's-
general idea. That's all I'm really asking.
That's why our DC2.
That's why it routes over to the real NIC to go out.
That's why our DC1 is the 02.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
The DNS that would say it was 10, 13.
2.5 and 2.7. 10, 13, 2.5, and 2.7.
That is 11.
I had a class Saturday. Is it new class?
Well,
Yeah,
you
it's
can
starting.
just wipe that machine out.
Starting
It's
this
a
week.
virtual machine right there. But it's
Should be
CTS.
show that, it's like security.
Security
Security
plus.
plus? Yeah, should be show.
But you can just
Check
use
it.
this. That's
Yeah, I
not
took it.
stuff.
No, that's not online.
Show?
I mean, yeah, it's not online.
Oh.
Yeah, that's what I've heard. Most people that took it, like,
Hold on a second.
they think it was.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6,
I'm
7,
okay with
8,
security.
9,
I don't need
10, 11, 12.
I heard it was just like concepts.
16,
It wasn't really,
17,
when you like technical, I mean,
20,
it's not
21,
technical,
22,
And you're not delving.
24,
Right.
25, 26.
You're just like understanding.
Yeah, like,
Yeah.
type some run somewhere.
Right. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I've already signed in and I don't want to pull it up
Security,
there
the
because
security sector for
I'm recording. I don't want to be on the
pretty,
internet, but I can see
pretty
you are.
difficult to understand. People that deal with it actually might go ahead. It's like one of the hardest things. Right. You gotta know like everything about a computer. Think about all the people that like do like really don't understand programming.
Doing
Like,
programming
what?
Well, because, you know, not anytime, but
Not
they
like
do have
security,
hours,
but
I don't know,
like,
off
you know,
the top of my
yeah,
head,
it's
but
cybersecurity.
they have hours,
Yeah, what's
I
You
don't
at
know
least
what
gotta
the hours
understand
are,
them, right?
but they do have certain hours, they're not open 24 hours a week.
Well, no.
Okay, I'm gonna click install.
What's that?
Yeah,
Yeah, it should be the same.
that's what we got to do.
Supposed to check and get skill set. How did you change this?
I'm gonna remember it every time I can, but it's
Looking at this, I haven't played one in a while, but it looks like this is a control power.
Are you following up? Are you doing the follow-up with him?
I'm trying, but that's not what's happened.
Frustrating.
It's, the, you know, the IPs that like I lost him on the first.
Yeah.
We can make it.
Yeah, and
140
I can
savings.
even I do 3 a day. So only 16.
Yeah. 3 a day is going to be like.
You just do it in class because you can't follow it. Yeah.
When he realized what he had done, it was worth like 17,000. He had a couple $1 million sitting in a Bitcoin account. He didn't even realize.
Professor.
Yeah.
Problems connection like DC, but the configuration for it is right.
It is DC. We want DC.
Yeah, exactly. Is this
What
correct?
do you mean? I see you're connected. How come my phone's connected? I see it.
yesterday.
It's like network cable is not that practical, you know?
$14,000 for the, yeah, and then within like 40 minutes, it dropped down to like 50. And now it's
Oh,
down
I
there
was
within a
not
day,
connected to the
dropped
virtual
to 40.
switch.
Yeah. Hey, listen, I never took it out. I always kept money in there. It was up to 14. We were just talking about that. It was up to 14 yesterday. You know, the funny thing is, looking at the unique shade of your skin right now, it is just so red.
Yeah. Mine's still sitting in there. Oh my God.
Yeah, I'm not taking it out. I have
After
no.
that plummet, I took it all out.
Have you ever used pro.coinbase.com?
Yeah.
Then you can save some fees. I'm using an external wallet too. I have half one in Coinbase and a half in Exodus. It's an external wallet. Figuring if Coinbase gets attacked, I don't want to lose everything. You know, it's very possible. You don't know what you know that guy in India. Some guy who had a whole bunch of bitcoins, like ran a Bitcoin market. You know, he went over to India and died with all their money in his pocket.
Yeah.
It's like Kurtzman.
Yeah, the Canadian. I don't think he died because apparently it's real easy to get dead in India. Okay, I'm going to sign into my DC. No, apparently you can go get a death certificate really easily in India.
Oh.
You know, if I was deathly ill, nothing against Indians, I wouldn't make a pilgrimage there for health reasons. So if I was that sick, that'd be the last place I would go to.
And half of the bitcoins were transferred from the account.
I'm sorry?
Half of the bitcoins were transferred from their account, so they don't know who.
No, I don't think it was half. I think it's all gone.
Right. When they were investigating, half
Yeah.
of it was already transferred.
Yeah, but they couldn't sign into his wallet, and then they were able to sign into the wallet, and nothing was there.
I imagine.
Okay, so guys, when you create your first DC in the forest, it configures your forward lookup domain for you. It's integrated in Active Directory. It's part of the database. You don't have to do manual transfers like we did with standalone DNS servers. What it doesn't do, it doesn't create your reverse. So I'm going to do that now. It's going to be for the 172.16 network. Guys, just because there's 3 fields here doesn't mean you have to fill them all out. My subnet mask is /16, so that's what I'm going with. It's going to be integrated in Active Directory. When a client boots up, we're going to allow it to create its own records that it needs and integrate them into DNS. Okay. If you want, guys, this will happen automatically if we give it time. I can force it to create a pointer record for my server. Right now, I don't have a reverse record for DC1. So I'm going to open up PowerShell and type register DNS client or ipconfig register DNS. The bottom one is the old school command. The top one is the PowerShell command. Go back to reverse, and you should see a pointer record for the server now. Okay.
So what's the command?
Register DNS client or ipconfig register DNS. This is the command. This is the PowerShell applet. Okay, so now I'm going to go to DC2. I'm going to create a second domain controller for my Contoso.com. If my first one goes down, this one will handle the load. I just got a text from Bitcoin. It's up 11,000. I have 2 PCs in my house mining. The amount of grief that I'm getting from my wife about those PCs sitting there with no monitors connected, just all they're doing is mining for me. Then one day, I'm going to cash in my Bitcoin and I'm going to say, I told you so.
That's classic.
Again, give it an IP, change the host name. Standard operating procedure. Zero 0.3, my gateway is 0.1. Who's my DNS server now?
DC102.
I should be able, once I get my DNS fixed, I should be able to run NSLookup, Contoso.com, and it should come back with my DC1. If I do this after I have DC2, it should come back with both DCs. If I can't do this, I will never be able to join my computer to the domain. So every time you join a computer to the domain, you should do that just to make sure you won't have issues. 9 times out of 10, the issue is DNS. So I'm going to change the name and reboot. Guys, believe it or not, a DC is not joined to the domain. If you join it to the domain, it just unjoins it first when you promote it. So never join a DC to the domain. You promote a DC, you don't join it.
So you're gonna install ADDS on all the DCs? Okay.
Right. While I'm waiting, I'm going to boot up DC3. Okay, now I'm going to add Active Directory, install Active Directory.
So you can install them all at once?
You can, I'm just doing it just to make it go quicker. While one thing is happening, I'm installing it on another. Guys, I would try to install I would try to do 3 quizzes a week. Okay, I'm going to promote this to a domain controller. So I already have the domain, I already have the tree, I already have the forest. So this is going to be another domain controller for an existing domain. I'm going to type in, guys, look at this. If I click change and put in my user account name first, it should find the domain for you. Okay? If you try to say select first, it can't find anything. You have to be able to sign in first. Click next. I'm going to unselect this global catalog. I'll explain that here in a little bit once I get everything up and running. Again, it's going to install a DNS server, guys. Every time I create a DC, I'm going to have a DNS server on it. Just like I want redundant domain controllers, I want redundant DNS servers. Again, this is grayed out. It can't create the delegation. If I wanted to, I could take the backup of another DC and promote this to a domain controller. Let's say I was doing this on a remote site that had an ISDN line or some slow connection. I don't want to be replicating all that traffic over the WAN link. So what I can do is click this, grab a backup from DC1, and have it look on that backup. It'll copy everything from the backup, and once it's fully promoted, at that point it'll replicate anything since the backup.
Changes.
Yeah, so it's going to save you some bandwidth. So right now I could decide who I want to replicate from, and this, it's not really important. I only have one DC right now. Again, when you make a change to one DC, you're not making a change to the DC, you're making a change to the domain. And it will get copied to all DCs. In this class, you're going to have problems with replication. And I understand that, and I'll show you when we get to that point. Click install. This is going to take a few minutes. I'm going to start configuring DC3. The second DC won't take as long as the first because it's not creating all the records, it's just replicating it. Okay. While I'm waiting for everything to move forward, I'm going to go and create DC 5 and 6. Okay, I'm back on DC3. I'm going to do the IP settings and the host name. One 172.16.04. The gateway is 172.16.01. My DNS server is 172.16. What is my DNS server? Three isn't fully up yet, but that's okay. CS01 DC3. I'm going to check out DC2. DC2 is done. I'm going to install Active Directory on DC3. I'm also going to boot 5. Okay, guys, let's look at DC2. If I go into DNS on DC2, there's Contoso. There's my reverse. My pointer record for DC2 is already there. If I go to DC1, and refresh my DNS, I can see it has the same exact data. If I run an NS lookup now on my domain, it should come back with both DCs. NS lookup, Contoso.com. There's both DCs. I'm going to go back to 2. I'm going to go to highlight my server, go to forwarders. Remember, I point to DC1 for name resolution. I'm going to go to DC1 now. What did I do for my IP settings on DC1 for the DNS client?
Use the schools.
I used the schools. But what happens if I look at it now?
It'll be set to
It configured IPv6, loopback for DNS. That's my primary. IPv6 loopback. And IPv4 loopback as my, because my DNS client running on DC1 will never know what the DNS server on DC1 holds. So I have to point my client to the server on the same machine so it can resolve names. And then if that server doesn't know the name that you're trying to resolve, it will then forward that out to the school's DNS server. So now, explain to me why DC2 will do that as well. Why, if someone points to DC2 for DNS, and DC2 doesn't know the answer, why isn't it sending it to DC1?
Because nothing sends back, nothing should be sending back to DC1, right?
Right, it's the same data. If DC2 doesn't know, DC1 won't know either. So there's no reason to forward any traffic for DNS from 1 to 2 because they both hold the same data. So if you send a request to DNS2 for name resolution for google.com, it doesn't bother sending it to DC1. It sends it directly to the outside servers. Because if DC2 doesn't know, DC1 won't know either. Okay. If I go to Tools, Active Directory Users and Computers, on DC1 or DC2, they both know the same information. Okay, now I want to talk about two groups. The Enterprise Admin Group and the Schema Admin Group. Those are only in the root domain, the very first domain. They are no other domain. So my domain admin in contosha.com is also an enterprise admin and a schema admin. So if I want to create new domains, not a new domain controller, a new domain, a datum.com, something like that, I need to be an enterprise admin. So if I create a new domain at datum.com, it's going to create a new domain admin for datum.com. And at that point, that's just a domain admin. It can make new users, new computer accounts for that domain, but it can't create new domains. Only the enterprise admin can do that. So if I go into my administrator account, I can see that I'm a member of the domain admins group, and I'm the enterprise admin, meaning I'm the entire forest admin. I can make changes to any machine in the entire forest. All child domains, the domain admin for the child domains are only domain admins for that domain only. So if I'm going to create new domains, I have to be this admin. If I want to create trust relationship between domains, I need to be this admin. The other group that's only in the root domain is a schema admin. So if I have, if you're a schema admin, think of a book. If I were to describe a book, I would say it has a front page, a back page, a binding. It's going to have a cover. It's going to have an index. It's going to have a table of contents. I'm not describing one book. I'm just describing what a book is. That's what your schema does. It describes what attributes a user account has, what attributes a computer account has, what attributes a GPO will have. So it defines each object in your domain. If you make a change to it, you can never undo that change. So if you make a change and you screw up it, you screw up the entire forest. I have one schema admin for the entire forest. There's not one for each domain. So if you make a change and you corrupt something, you rebuild everything, or you get fired. When you want to create an email server in your domain, you have to change the admin, you have to change the schema, because you need to add an email field to all of your user accounts and computer accounts, and even printers. Let's say I want to schedule a room with a printer, I might need to schedule that printer. So it needs an email account as well. So at that point, you need to change your schema. A lot of times, like the email software will give you a utility that'll change the schema for you. If you're going to change the schema, most likely that's going to be the board of directors need to approve that. You don't want to take that on your own. You want to get someone's approval to do that, so they're aware that, and they take some of the responsibility in making this change. you have to justify why you do it. The tools to modify your schema, they prevent you from running. You have to do a special command to access those tools, and I'll show you those commands. So keep in mind that these two groups only exist in the first domain in your force. Enterprise admin and schema admin. You can see that that user account is a member of the enterprise admin and schema admin. Okay, so let's go to DC3, see if it's done installing. So now what we're going to do is we're going to create a new domain in an existing tree in an existing forest. So I'm going to promote this I don't want this one. I'm not going to create a new domain controller for an existing domain. I want to create a new domain in an existing forest. I can do two things. A child domain, meaning my parent domain name will be included in my domain, or a new tree domain, which means my parent domain is not included in my domain name. So I'm going to do a child domain first. So the parent domain is contoso. Look, I'm going to do this. Change. I'm going to type in contoso.com. I typed the wrong password, I think. Contoso. Okay. Whose credentials am I using right here? Enterprise admins. I'm creating a new domain, not a new domain controller. If I was creating a new domain controller, I would just need that domain's admin. But I'm creating a new domain, so I'm making a change to my force. So I need to be an enterprise admin. So that's whose credentials I'm supplying here, the enterprise admin. So my new domain is going to be called child. So child.contoso.com. Click next. I'm going to leave this global catalog server here. Okay. Now it's not yellow. So what it's going to do is contact the parent domain. Go to the DNS and create a new child DNS namespace. For some reason it doesn't work. Half the time it doesn't work. So I'm going to show you how to manually create that delegation. I want DC3 and DC4 to control the namespace child.contoso.com. I don't want my parent domain. I don't want that parent domain to hold all the name resolutions. I want each domain controller to handle its own namespace for its domain. So there's a 50% chance that this will work. I'm not taking the risk. So I'm going to go to DC1 or 2. Doesn't matter which, they're both the same. And I'm going to right click and say new delegation. So if anyone, because look, here's one, I want you to think of it as a hierarchy. This is 10, 13, 2, 5, 10, 13, 2, 7. And under that, I have contoso.com, the DNS servers for contoso.com. Then under that, I have child.contoso.com. So if I have a client, part of Contoso.com, and it points to a DNS server in this domain, and I say I want to resolve www.child.contoso.com, would this machine know about that? No. So what will it do? It's going to send it up here. Because by the definition of the forwarders, if you don't know the names, send it up. Well, by doing this delegation, it's going to know who the servers are for child.contoso.com and send that down there. So if you don't do the delegations, the parent DC won't know how to get to the child DC. So I'm going to do this new delegation, and I'm going to delegate the namespace child to be controlled by the 2 DNS servers in the child domain. The fully qualified domain name is child.contoso.com. So, guys, I mainly have to add in the servers because they don't exist yet. So I'm going to add CS01 DC3.child.contoso.com will have an IP address of 172.16.0.4. Clicking resolve isn't going to help. Those DNS servers aren't done yet. It'll give you an error. Don't worry about it. Now I'm going to add the other server. CS01 DC4.child.contoso.com will have an IP address of 0.5. Again, it's not set up yet. Click next and finish. It's grayed out. So it means basically I'm passing that portion of the namespace down to those 2 other DNS servers. I could, instead of having it grayed out like I did, I could have created a new domain, and it would have been the same thing except for this will be a folder, and it will hold all the records for that namespace right on this server. But I don't want to put too many eggs in one basket and make these 2 DNS servers handle my entire domain, my entire force. I want these 2 DNS servers handling just their domain. I'll have DNS servers in each individual domain handling their own namespace. The delegation, what it does is it doesn't create a delegation, sometimes it creates a domain. And so you can't ever reach your child DCs. So in 2003, this is how you always have to do it. Okay? But in 2012, they came, maybe it was 2008, they came up with this other method. It worked fine in 2012, just not 2016, it's just hit or miss. So I'm going to leave it as create the DNS delegation, but I already did it ahead of time. The other thing is, whose credentials do I need?
You said enterprise.
Okay, to create a new domain. But now I'm not asking it to create a new domain, I'm asking it to create a delegation.
Okay,
So who's
domain admin?
right for the parent domain that you're trying to add the delegation to? So it's important to understand whose authority do you need. You don't want to overuse. I don't need to make it be an enterprise admin to create a user account. I just need to be a domain admin. So in this particular case, I just need to supply the domain admin's account for the parent domain. In this case, it happens to be the enterprise admin as well. Click next. It's going to verify the DNS name. Again, same information. then install. So I'm going to give it a little bit. This kind of takes a long time because it's creating essentially a new domain. So I'm going to go over to DC4 and configure I'm not sure why DC4 isn't coming up. This is not a good thing to do, but
Just a question.
Yeah.
Just forget something. When you on DC2, it's gonna be a domain controller to an existing domain. Is that right?
correct. Because Contoso.com already is created.
It has to be Contoso.com.
Yeah, it's going to be a domain controller for Contoso.com, and Contoso.com is already there.
Yeah. Just
If it can't resolve it, you have a DNS problem. If you can't do nslookup space Contoso.com, you got to fix your DNS. So this IP will be 172.16.05. Who should I point to for DNS? I'm going to point to DC3 because DC3 knows about child.contoso.com. Listen, if I send DC4 to here, the delegation will send it back down to DC3 anyways. So why add that additional step? Because remember, if it's child.contoso.com, the DCs on contoso.com don't know anything. It's going to send it back down to a child DC. So click OK.
Yes.
I'm going to draw it out. CS01 DC4, right? Okay. I'm only going to draw all the DCs that I have so far. DC1, DC2, DC3, DC4. DC1 goes out. DC2
goes to DC1.
DC3
goes to both of them.
And DC4
goes to DC3.
Right. after I promote, who does this, now this, the blue is describing the DNS server. This DNS server points to this, no, it's not even true in that case. This is the initial setup. Once I promote it, it changes it. Who does DC2 point to once I'm done?
Himself.
Itself. Who does DC3 point to?
Himself.
Right, but if I go into the forwards in DNS, who does it point to? 2 and 1.
How many DCs are we gonna set up?
6. Well, no. We're just starting.
So, you have 10.
No, we're going to be closer to 20, 30 servers before this. Right now, we're only on one side. Right now, we're going to do sites. So just be patient. It's not that, yeah, PowerShell.
I'm trying to get the script ready now.
Before promoting the DC, we need to make him member of the domain. Or this is not a
Never.
requirement?
It is not only is it a requirement, it is frowned upon. Do not make your DCs a member of the domain.
Okay.
While I'm waiting, I'm installing Active Directory in DC4. I'm waiting for DC3 to come up.
If I can't start a DC, what's causing that?
You might have rebooted it before it was done running sysprep. What does it say? Oh, you have to probably have the wrong hard disk. We need to create a hard disk. Yeah, that's not admin. That's your administrator.
I think it's the problem because I was about to register to do NS lookup on it.
Yeah, you have the wrong. So now, guys, I'm going to sign in on DC3. So I'm going to go to Tools, look at DNS, my DNS server. And I'm going to look at the DNS settings. So who do I point to first? Then I point to DC1. Now if I look at my DNS server, who am I forwarding to? So these two will forward to these two. These two will forward to the two upstreams. So I'm going to run NS lookup. Now I'm going to use NSLOOKUP as a utility, not a command. So I'm just typing NSLOOKUP alone, and my prompt changes. So I'm going to do CS01 dc1.contoso.com. Who gave me that answer?
DC1?
I'm on DC3. Who gave me the answer?
DC2.
No, my DNS client got that answer from the IPv6 loopback. So DC3 got the answer, the DC3 client got the answer from DC3 server.
Yeah.
Where did DC3 server get it from?
DC2.
Well,
DC1. Yes.
yeah, one of the others. Because right now I'm saying a non-authoritative answer, meaning I got that answer from someone else. Okay, so it doesn't really know. From this screen, I don't know where I got the answer from, but I can tell you now that DC3 sent the request to one of these two servers. Now I'm going to query myself, CS01 dc3.child.contoso.com. Do I have an authoritative answer? Yes. Meaning the machine that is the SOA, do you remember talking about the SOA record? The machine that is an SOA answered that question for me. The start of authority. You are the start of authority, and I know I have a definitive answer. So now I'm going to connect to one of my other servers. Server 172.16.02. So now I'm going to point my DNS client directly to one of these machines. So I'm going to type CS01 dc1.contoso. I'm talking to DC1 and I'm getting an authoritative answer for contoso.com. Now I'm going to do this. CS01 dc3.child.contoso.com. Who gave me the answer? Who gave my DNS client the answer? This machine. So the DNS client on here queried this server to get that name to be resolved. This server doesn't know child.contoso.com. It went and asked this machine, the DNS server, for the answer, came back and gave it to my DNS client. So I have the non-authoritative answer for that. Meaning DC1 isn't the start of authority for child.contoso.com. Okay, so I'm going to exit out of this. Exit out of this. I'm going to go to reverse. I don't have a reverse lookup because the default behavior is when I create a new domain, a new DNS zone, it only replicates to other DNS servers in the same domain. But since my reverse, they're all in the same network, 172.16. There's no reason to recreate it at every domain. So I'm just going to go to my parent domain and tell it to replicate that 172.16 zone to all DNS servers in the entire forest, not just the parent domain. So I'm going to go to DC1 or 2, doesn't matter which, they're both equal, as far as you know. I'm going to go to my reverse and right click it and go to properties. Right now I want to replicate this to all DNS servers in this domain. I'm going to change it to all DNS servers in the forest. Wait a little bit, DC3, then DC4 will have a copy of it. So now I'm going to promote DC4 to a DC. Which one do I want to do? This is going to be a DC for child.contoso.com. In existing, because child.contoso.com already exists. I'm just adding a second domain controller for my child domain. Child.contoso.com. Let me ask this. Whose authority do I need? Of what domain?
The child.
The child domain. I'm not creating a new domain. The domain already exists. I'm just adding a second domain controller to an existing domain. So all I need is my child domain admin. Now I'm going to see if you get the next question right. I'm not going to do a global catalog. I'll get to that. This is my Active Directory restore password. This is not my domain admin password. Listen, once I promote a machine to a domain controller, it will no longer have local accounts. So what happens if the machine crashes and I can't sign into Active Directory? I need one password that will get me into Repair Active Directory. That's the password. If I change my admin password, it has no effect on this. The only way to change this password is through a utility called NTDS util. Okay, let's say I didn't do my delegation ahead of time. When I did my delegation, I added 2 servers, one for DC3 and one for DC4. Let's say I didn't add DC4. Whose authority do I need to add to update the delegation? The enterprise admin or the domain admin?
The domain for Contoso.
Right. I'm not making a force-wide change. I'm just making a change on the Contoso domain. So I need the domain admin for Contoso.com. That's where the delegation exists. If I was creating a new domain, then I need to create a new, I need to use the enterprise admin. Right now I'm just changing an object on the parent domain. So if I were to do this, I would say change, and I would put Contoso again. It isn't consistent, so I manually did it. I don't care where I replicate from. There's only one machine in that domain so far. Install. Okay. Now I'm going to go to DC5, configure the IP settings and host name, then we'll take a break. This is DC5, so this will be 6. And who do I point to for DNS? This is going to be a new tree domain. I'm just going to point to the root of the forest. This isn't going to be a child domain of my child. This is going to be a new, it's a child domain of the root, but it's going to have a new namespace. It's not going to be, I'm not going to be something.contoso.com.
So it's a new domain.
It's a new, called tree domain is the new term that Microsoft is using. It's really a child domain, but it's beginning of a new tree. CS01 DC 5.
So DC3, the parent domain was contoso.com and the new domain name was Chad.
Child.contoso.com, yes.
Chad.
But you don't need to add the contoso.com. Guys, your goal isn't to complete the work. The goal is to understand it. So if you're trying to rush right now just to get caught up with me, you're missing the point. I want you to know what you're doing. So the goal is to really learn, not to keep up. I'm going to install Active Directory on this machine. And just check out DC4. Okay, guys, DC4 is still rebooting. Let's take a break. Then we'll create a new tree domain. Then we're going to talk about global catalog servers and operation master roles. We run it over here. Okay. You can move this one.
Question. This is a new domain I'm proposing.
No,
I
just
still need-
contoso.com.
Here?
Yeah.
I think it's, I'll text.
No, I'm sorry. Just chat. Just chat.
Okay.
All lowercase.
Should I use this one instead of this one? Since this one's still.
No, it's fine. If you reboot
But,
the.
But
Thank you.
the credential, I wanna, it's still contoso.com because it's gonna replicate it to,
Right.
Child.
No, it needs the enterprise admin.
Or the enterprise, I mean.
Right, which is contoso.com.
just let everything down together.
Right next to the guy in the back. In the corner, okay.
I got it.
Okay. Okay, now DC4 is up, which is the second DC in the child domain. I'm gonna go to the reverse. I see that I have the reverse now. Copy over from the parent domain. I see I have the child. I'm gonna go to DC3. I'm just gonna close DNS and reopen it. I have the child, the reverse. I have the child. If I look at forwarders, I'll forward up to DC1 and 2. DC1 and 2 will forward out to the internet. So if I want to resolve to Condoso.com from these two machines, it goes to DC1 and 2. Hopefully they'll have it cached. If they have it cached, then I'll get the answer from them. Otherwise, we'll forward it out to the DNS server on the internet. So now we're going to go to DC5 and create a new tree domain. So I'm going to promote this, add a new domain to an existing forest. This time I'm going to do a tree domain. And again, for DNS, I pointed to the root domain in the forest. Because it's a new tree domain, it's really a child domain of the root domain. So the forest name is Contoso. Microsoft has another fake domain name they use all the time called Adatum. The child domain name does not include the parent. Whose credentials do I have to supply here? The enterprise admins. Click next.
Is there a different computer?
Any of the ones that are free. There's one over here.
Oh, but it's not set up yet.
Yep. But that one should be set up.
It's like keeps restarting.
Normal. That's the first time it'll restart twice. Oh, okay. I'll come back to it. Let me type. You're choosing. This is yeah. You have to this one or that one. No one's sitting up there, right? You can go up there, but we have to run this, the software. Yeah.
Okay. Also on that one, you're not gonna want to go local,
No. I probably should have, but I'm not going to. I'll explain. Okay. I haven't gotten into the discussion of global catalogs. I will though. Okay, now look. In this particular case, because it's a new tree, I don't want to create a delegation. But again, if I try to point to one of my parent DCs and say adatum.com, it's not going to know Adatum, it's going to send it out to the internet. So what I'm going to do is, I'm going to go to my parent DC. And I'll go here and do something called a conditional forwarder. A new conditional forwarder. So I'm going to say adatum.com. Normally it forwards out to the internet. But for adatum.com, I'm going to tell it to send it to DC 5 and 6. Otherwise, normally send out for this send to 5 and 6. So I'm going to do 172.0.7 and 0.8. It can't resolve the names yet. I'm going to replicate this to all DNS servers in the force, in the domain. You know, if I did it this way, I'm going to erase this. If I replicate to all the other DNS servers in my domain, so we have the internet, we have the DNS servers for Contoso, we have the DNS servers for child, and we have the DNS server for Adapt. So if I have a client who points to this, one of these DNS servers, and tries to resolve adatum.com, what will it do? It will forward it down to this DNS server to get an answer, right? If I transfer to all servers. But what if I have a client attached to here and I say resolve something.adatum.com? What's it going to do?
Go to Contoso.
It's going to send it to Contoso. What is Contoso then going to do?
Send it back.
Here's why I don't like to do this option. And this will work. What if the client was pointing here, and it sees that conditional forwarder? It's just going to forward it back to itself, and it could be, possibly confusing to students. It would work. It's really not forwarding because it's the start of authority, so we'd kind of ignore that forwarder. But what benefit would I have of doing this versus just here? Well, if I do that conditional forwarder to all DNS servers, and the client was pointing here, it would see that conditional forwarder and send it directly to here, without having to send it to the root domain first.
Which one's like best practice?
This one probably is best practice because I'm not overburdening these DNS servers. I don't want to keep sending everything to these DNS servers. But just be aware that I will have these conditional forwarders also on this domain, and they won't really have any bearing. But it might confuse someone. So I'm going to create this conditional forwarder saying, if you don't know the answer, send it out to the internet, unless it's adatum.com. Send it to these two servers. That, of course, are timing out because I don't have set up yet. So I'm going to click OK. So now I'm going to go to DC5. If I want to test it, I don't have any domains yet. I have no records yet. But this delegation will not work for a child domain. It will never work for a child domain because it's not a delegation. It's a new domain. Click Next. It's a new namespace. It's not under contoso.com. That's why it won't work. Guys, this lab normally takes 2 or 3 class sessions to get done. Just getting everyone on the same page. check your DNS. Open up the, okay, click OK. Click OK. Now try again. Try to do NS lookup. And try to resolve Windows.com. NS lookup, Windows.com. Okay, I'm going to click install. While that's installing, I'm going to go configure my IP settings and host name for DC6. One second, did I put 7 and 8? This should be.
This should be 7.
Okay, wait. So my 4s are wrong. I should be 6 and 7. In a little bit, we'll see those conditional forwarders pop up on all DCs. It's already there. Of course, I changed it, so I have to replicate the change. So that should also be on DC3, DC4, the whole 9 yards. Okay, so somehow it's not connecting to 3 and 4. So you physically have a connection issue. Verify that you're doing IP config all right on that same screen. So you have an IP problem, 123.16.0.7. Who should I point to? I am on the second DC for my new tree domain.
So the first one.
To the first DC of my tree domain, which is .6. Would it work if I pointed to here? Yes, the conditional forwarder works in the back. You know, so eventually it would get to where I want, but I've added an extra step. Duplicate. So listen. So minimize this. Go right here. Go in the networking tab. You're using an IP somewhere else.
Thank you.
So this is CS01 DC6. Guys, and you're going to create a whole lot of problems for yourselves doing the labs, which is good because then you get to practice fixing those issues.
Professor, because of all the videos, this test this time is not going to be allowed notes.
I haven't even thought about that. I haven't even thought about that.
Can we not do
I honestly, guys, the notes you create these cookbooks and they do you in. You know, it's just, you know, if you want to be Rachel Ray, that's a different industry. This is not an industry for recipes. There is no one recipe that fits all. I'm installing Active Directory. DC5 is booting. I can't do anything with DC6 until DC5 is done. While I'm waiting, I'm going to pull something up here. Okay. I'm using this article. We used to have something called FSMA roles. Flexible Single Master Operations. Now they're called Operation Master roles. A lot of books still use the old name, but the new name is Operation Master roles. I'm probably still going to call them FSMA roles. And we have a total of 5 roles. 3 for that each domain has, and then 2 for our forest. The first one is the PDC emulator. The PDC emulator was, back in the day when we had NT40 domains, they had one DC called a PDC that was read-write, meaning it can handle authentication and stuff like that, but it can also create user accounts. There was only one machine that you could create user accounts on. Then you had backup domain controllers that were read-only. So if this PDC was down, then you couldn't create new accounts. You couldn't create new objects at all. Now, all DCs are read-write. But if you have any NT40 DCs still in your domain, some old BDCs, this machine would act, the machine that held this role would act as the read-write copy, the PDC. I doubt anyone has that anymore. But the PDC emulator does 2 other things. It is your NTP server. That is Network Time Protocol. It runs on port 123 UDP. Basically, every computer has a little tin tube soldered to the motherboard. And in that tube is a grown crystal, where they've grown a crystal and then they run a voltage through it. And that vibrates. And that vibration is kind of like the guy on a row team that sits at the front of the boat. They're going row, row, to keep everything in time. But every crystal isn't grown identical. So there's variations. So all computers have something called a time creep. Well, they'll be slower or faster than other computers. But in Active Directory, to prevent man-in-the-middle attacks, all the packets are signed and timestamped. If a packet is 5 minutes old, Active Directory assumes that that packet has been taken off the network altered and placed back on the network. So it doesn't trust them. So because of time creep, if a computer is 5 minutes old, at that point, no one will talk to it. So you need some sort of mechanism so computers can keep time. So basically, this machine, when every PDC in every domain, if I have 3 domains, which I do, I have 3 PDCs, all the clients in that domain will sync to that time clock. And that time clock will sync to time.microsoft.com, and Microsoft will sync to the Navy's time clocks. So they'll all be consistent times. So that server is needed. Every day, computers sync to a time clock. If your PDC goes down, you potentially could stop communication within 24 hours. It's important. So when you are laying out your master roles, you're planning to place your master roles, you want to make sure your PDC is in a central location supported by high bandwidth, highly reliable links, highly available. This machine needs to be up and running at all times. Not only that, the PDC not only is it your time server, it's also your password sync machine. Normally, replication takes 5 minutes within the site. It could be a half hour, 8 hours on different sites. But when you do a password change, you need that to replicate immediately. So when someone changes a password, you contact only the PDC in your domain to change that password. And at that point, replication occurs immediately. If you disable an account, because you just fired someone, you don't want them to go around to another computer being able to sign in quickly, that gets immediately replicated because that is done on the PDC. So every time you do a password change, it connects to the PDC. So that PDC does 3 purposes. For old NT40 servers, it is your primary domain controller that's read-write. If you have none of those, then it's your time clock. All machines in that domain will talk to that machine to synchronize, even other DCs. And other machines will be whenever you do a password change, you connect to the PDC to make that change. Disable an account, you connect to the PDC. So even if you launch, like right now my PDC is DC1. So if I go to DC2, sign into DC2, go to Active Directory users and computers and reset someone's password, it immediately, in the background, connects me to DC1. So even if you sign into another DC, it'll connect you back to DC1. Yep.
So it automatically does that because that's the role that the PDC has? Or do you
Correct.
set it up like that? Okay.
That I will go over and tell you where your PDC is initially. Okay. Your relative RID master. Your RID master is your relative IDs. Every time it's relative to that domain, not your forest. Every time you create a new object, a new GPO, new computer object, a new user object, a new link object, it needs a relative ID. Your RID master passes out those relative IDs. It passes them out to other DCs. So every time, I don't quote me on this number, but I think it's 500. Every time a DC boots up, it will contact the RID master, grab 500 relative IDs. When you connect to that DC and you create a new object, it will use one of its relative IDs from this cache. So if your RID master goes down, you might not even be aware of it. It's not until all of your DCs exhaust its cache before you realize it's down. So how highly available do you need to make this DC? It's not that important. You know, it could be on a remote site, not supported by a fast WAN link. So that's what the purpose of it does. passes out relative ITs to other DCs. They'll grab a lot of them, and then at that point, use from that lot. The infrastructure master. It maintains a list of all objects in the domain. This isn't really clear. So if I have a user object from another domain added to a security group in this domain, that's the thing that's going to keep track of it. This is important, and I'll explain why, in relationship to the global catalog. Okay, my schema master. That is the machine that holds my schema definitions. So if I make a change to my schema, I have to connect to that machine to do it. Again, your schema describes what a user object is, it describes what a computer object is, it describes what a link object is. These are the attributes to make a user object. These are the attributes to make a computer object. How highly available do you need that machine to be?
Very high.
How often do you change your schema?
Okay, understood.
Not, it can be on a remote satellite site with a really slow connection, and that might be good because you don't want people to be messing with that. It's a one-way change. You cannot undo it. There is no restoring from the backup. It's rebuilding your entire forest. And the last one is the domain naming master. It's responsible for adding and removing, keeps track of new domains. Every time you create a new domain, the domain naming master is contacted. How highly available do you need it? If you don't create new domains, you'll never use it. These two, there's one per forest. These three, there are one per domain. So how many operation masters do I currently have if I have 3 domains?
1.
Or
1. Wait, count together, add them together. Add them together.
pick any number between 10 and 12.
9.
12.
Math is our strong point.
Oh.
11. I have 3 domains. Contoso.com, child, then a data. I have PDC here, a RID, an infrastructure master, a schema master, and a domain naming master. These 2 are for the entire forest. These are my domain, just for the Contoso. On this one, I have a PDC, a RID, and an infrastructure master only for child. This one is a PDC, a RID, and an infrastructure master. 6 and 5. Okay. Which DC do you think these are on currently? On DC1, the first DC in that domain. Where are these? The first DC in child, which is 3. Where are these?
6.
And I'm going to show you how to move them around. Okay, guys, DC5 is up and running. I'm going to promote DC6 now. For all you guys with the bad math, I have you on film.
Oh, come on. That's not fair.
Okay, so if I go to DC5 DNS, Guys, in my opinion, DNS is the most important thing in your network. If you don't have a DNS server that's up and running properly, you don't have a network. So I can see I have the adatum.com, I have my reverse. If I go to conditional forwarders, I'll eventually get those as well. Maybe it's smart enough to realize not to send them to this machine. That would be good. Okay, so I'm going to do this. Test you. I'm going to do NS lookup. Who am I connecting to myself? Who am I connecting to?
Look back on IPv6.
Right, so my DNS client on DC5 is connecting to the DNS server on DC5. DNS client and DNS server share no data. The only way the DNS client will know what the server has on the same machine is if your DNS client points to the same server on the same machine. So I'm going to do cs01-dc3.child.contoso.com. From my DNS client's perspective, who is answering that question?
DC3?
DC3. Good. From my DNS server perspective, who's answering that question? I sent that up to who?
I think DC1.
DC1 or 2, and the DC1 or 2 did what? Send it down to DC3 or 4.
4.
You know, so basically, DC5 contacted DC1 or 2, 1 or 2 of them, which either one, then went down and contacted 3 or 4 to get the answer. Sent it back up to 1 or 2, 1 or 2 sent me the answer. So right now, DC1 or 2 has that in memory as cached. So next time I try to resolve that name, it'll just get it from cache, at least for the next hour. Okay, so now I'm going to go to DC6, promote it to a DC. Which one?
An existing.
Right, datum.com. Whose credentials do I need? What domain? A datum. I'm not going to make this a global catalog. Let's say I did have a DNS, which I don't. I mean, I need to update, which I don't need to, because I manually set it. Even if it's not even a delegation anyway, it's a conditional forwarder. Whose credentials would I have to supply here? If we did have a delegation, where would it exist? Contoso. So I would have to supply the domain admins for Contoso, because that's where that DNS is. That's who I'm pointing to. I'm only going to replicate from 5 because that's all it is. That's the only one in this domain. Okay, guys, leave this alone. Let's take another break because we're just going to wait. All I have to do is show you how to move these roles and talk about the global catalog server. Okay, take another break. I don't know. I might not be able to. And this is the what day? 27th. Okay.
Make that a D.
AD.
Yeah, and put stick an I in there. Yeah.
Okay, I was gonna say. Um,
You want me to take it back or you want me to take it back?
you can take it.
I won't be. So one day, you don't care.
I don't know. Okay, cool.
So I won't see you tomorrow.
I'm sorry. What did you? What's up with that?
My brother got a ticket to the transfer my license. So I'm like, put in.
Oh.
But I didn't know. He didn't know either. So then I might not see you tomorrow.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna see if I can make it.
It's right by your house.
It's not bad.
Oh, yes. We already agreed in type course. My problem was Linux. I gotta be. I was frustrated. It was impossible.
Okay, guys, I'm just going to take some of my disk for my DCs that are running and move them to a folder on the other disk, mechanical disk, just so I can save some space. Don't move the parent disk. Ever move the parent disk. Because in this class, you'll quickly run out of disk space. So once the machine is up and running, move the disk. Okay. So guys, I'm going to go and talk about the global catalog. All my DCs are up and running now. I'm going to go to Active Directory Sites and Services. And I'm going to highlight servers under default first site name. My global catalog is a server that I would query if I want to find out information about another domain. Also, if I use something, you don't know this discussion yet, if I use something called a universal group, which is not wise to use universal groups. The only reason you need to use universal groups is because you don't know what you're doing. And we'll get into groups later. Universal group membership is stored inside global catalogs. Now, I can define something called sites, which is a geographical location. So if I have like Central Campus and North Campus, I can define two sites. And there'll be a WAN link between those two sites. And by doing this, I can control replication and I can control which people use. So if I have a computer in Central Campus, when it signs in, I want it to sign in to a server on Central Campus. I don't want it to go across the WAN link and connect to a server at the North Campus. Also, if I have a DNS traffic, I want all my DNS clients in the central site to contact a DNS server on the central site, not go across the WAN link. That WAN link between two campuses is expensive. Guys, this was a few years ago, but you know how much our monthly internet bill is for BC? $40,000. Okay, so it's important to keep that traffic off the WAN link because it costs you money. So by defining sites, you can control replication traffic, you can control which servers people connect to, and we'll get into the sites later. Now the thing is, global catalog servers talk to one another and they replicate the data that they have. Too many global catalog servers causes unnecessary replication traffic. If I define a site on Central Campus, I would only have, at most, 2 global catalogs. I don't want a global catalog, 4 or 5 of them, because you're just replicating traffic you don't really need to replicate. The only problem is a global catalog server cannot go in infrastructure master. If in a multi-domain scenario. If I have one domain and you only plan on ever having one domain, you're fine. But the global catalog kind of keeps track of the same thing that the infrastructure master does. This does it at the domain level, the global catalog does it at the force level. So if you put a global catalog on the same machine as infrastructure master, the global catalog will think it knows more information than it does, and it won't replicate everything that it needs. So you need to move global catalog servers off infrastructure master. So right now, I have the global catalog on DC1. And you can see that right here. I also have the infrastructure master on DC1. So what I want to do is move my infrastructure master off of DC1 and move it to DC2. So this I'm going to move to DC2. So I'm on DC1. Now listen, I had a guy who was in my other class, and I didn't believe him at first, but I researched it and he was right. I said you can't have a global catalog on the same machine as the infrastructure master, unless you put the global catalog on every box, which is like overkill, but it will work. Microsoft says that's a viable solution. I don't know why you would want to create that many global catalogs. Again, it's only used when I'm going to query an object in another domain, or I'm going to query for a universal group membership. I don't need that many of them. At most, 2 per site, but if you know, some people only go with 1 per site. But, so you could put a global catalog on every single box. It's not wise, in my opinion. So I'm going to go to Tools, Active Directory Users, and Computers. I'm going to move this over. Who am I connected to right now? Right. So if I look here and go to Operation Masters, there's my RID, my PDC, or infrastructure. So if I want to move it, I need to connect to the DC I want to move it to. So I want to move it to DC2. I have 2 choices. First, go to DC2 and log in and do it from there. Or connect to DC2 from here. Change domain controllers. Connect to DC2. Now, even though I'm on DC1, any changes I make are going to be on DC2. So I'm going to go here, Operation Master, Infrastructure Master, change.
Excuse me. I missed it. So did you choose where you wanted the global catalog?
Yes, when I promoted, that's a good question actually. Remember when I promoted it, it had a checkbox where there's a global catalog? You decide where you want to put the global catalogs, except for the first domain on the force. The first DC in your force, it's automatically a global catalog. You can't uncheck it. And there, it's asking me if I want to transfer. It transfers. If you get an error, wait. Come back and do it in 5 minutes, because it just takes some time for replication to occur. So right now, DC2 is my infrastructure master. Guys, and you can move anything you want to any D. Like this, what machines could I move it to?
DC2, DC4, DC2.
I can move the schema master to any machine, any domain controller I want, because that's the force wide. Domain naming master, force wide. So I would try to spread these master roles out so they're not all in one box. Because if this box crashes, I would have lost all these master roles. And at that point, I can't transfer. I would have to manually seize those master roles, which means recreate them. So if your machine crashes and it's unrecoverable, meaning you can't restore from a backup, you then have to seize the roles. So I would try to spread. I would move my guys. Where should this be? Central location, high, good band, high bandwidth. So you would move these, that document I was showing you, wherever they need to be. I would make sure this is a central location, fairly central location, rarely used. So I might move these to a satellite site, wherever. So I would try to spread these roles out the best I can, to any DC I can. These 3 roles, I can move them to either DC1 or 2. The only rule is keep your global catalog off of the infrastructure master. So in the case like this, my global catalog is on 1, I put my infrastructure master on 2. My infrastructure master is here, I made this a global catalog. So I want to move that to DC4. Same with this. Guys, I have too many global catalogs, but I just did it to show you how to do the moves. So this is how you would move a RID, PDC, or infrastructure master. Connect to the DC you want to move it to, either remotely or go sign into that DC, then move it. Now I'm going to show you how to connect and move the domain naming master. Okay, so what did I click here to get to operation master? The domain, right? So I'm going to go into domains and trust. I'm now going to click the title. So if I want to move this, I want to connect to the DC I want to move it to, change to an Active Directory domain controller. I'm going to move it to DC4. Just because I can, just to show you. It could be in any DC in the forest. So I'm going to connect to 4, then go to Operation Master, and change it from 1 to 4. And it moved it. Okay, now we're going to do the hard one. There is nothing here for schema. I'm going to open up something called MMC. If I try to add a snap-in, there's nothing here for schema. Again, because they don't want you to mess with it. So, I'm looking for a certain command. Okay, look, right here. To see any of the utilities for the schema master, you have to run redserve32 schema management DLL. So I'm going to go to redserve32 schema If you don't run that, you can't get to any of your schema tools. So I'm going to now type MMC. Add a snap-in. Now I can see the schema. Click Add. Click OK. So here's my schema. I right-click this, Operation Master. I can move this wherever I want. Why did it connect me to DC1?
That's where the schema is, right?
Right. So I'm going to connect to, I'm going to connect to another DC. I'm going to connect to DC6. I say, wait a second, why are you connecting to that machine? It's not the schema master. That's fine. I'm going to go to Operation Master, move it to DC6.
When you add the snap in, it doesn't add it on the server manager, right?
Correct. Unless I save this console.
Oh.
I can save this console and call it Schema Master. I wouldn't do that in this case. But you can create your own custom snap-ins for junior admins and stuff like that. So I'm going to do this again. We'll go into MMC, add the snap-in, the schema snap-in. Now who did it connect me to? Because that's my schema. So you could do this for any role that you want to move. So let's say I want to move the infrastructure master on DC3 from DC to DC from 3 to 4. Right now, who am I connected to? Right, Contoso. I'm going to change domains and connect the child. Now who does it connect me to? 3. Well, that still is not what I want. Now I'm going to connect to 4. That's where I want to move it to. Operation Master, Infrastructure, change.
Are you able to access all this through the enterprise or?
Yep.
Okay. I was like, there's no.
In games, this is God mode.
Yeah.
This is God mode. Click yes. Moved. Just be patient. Don't go clicking around a bunch of things. Chill. So now I'm going to change to the other domain. A data. I want to move the infrastructure master from 5 to 6. So I connected to a datum. Now I'm going to connect to 6. That's where I want to move it to. Operation master. Change. Now you can move these other roles wherever you want. Again, I would try to share the load. Don't put everything in one box. I move this to 4. I move this to 6. As long as the global catalogs aren't on the same machine as the infrastructure master, you shouldn't have replication issues at all. You know, if you try to query another domain, you can't. Most likely, your infrastructure master is on a global catalog.
Can you go back to that? Like, do you have to change the tab to change which role you?
Absolutely.
So I obviously.
Okay, look, when I went to Operation Master, if I didn't click change,
Yeah, so you moved that.
I was trying to move this.
Yeah.
Okay. Didn't I change this already?
No, you just changed. You didn't switch the tab. That's fine.
Oh, okay.
So you moved.
Okay, thank you. I wonder why it moved so quickly. We're going to talk more about global catalogs when we get into discussion of groups. Click yes. Okay, last thing I'm going to talk about, and then we're done for the day. I'm going to go to Tools. Now, how do you make something a global catalog or not a global catalog after you promote it? So I'm going to go to Sites and Services. Go drill down to where your servers are and not click on that. Highlight NTDS settings for that server and go Properties and uncheck or check. The most forgotten term in Microsoft. Knowledge consistency checker. That is the process that defines what domain controller replicates to what domain controller. Not every domain controller replicates to every other. In this particular case, DC1 replicates from 3, 2, and 5. You can control this by defining sites, but the KCC defines that replication. While we're here, I'm showing it to you. So right now, DC3 will send data to 1, DC2 will send data to 1, 5 will send data to 1. I can't see where 1 sends. I would have to go to each of the other servers and see who received from 1. Okay?
You can't view that list on the other servers. Can you? Only on DC1.
Listen. How many domains do I have on this site? 3. A domain is a container. It holds user objects and computer objects. A site is a container. It holds domain objects. I could have 2 sites, each with its own domain, or I could have 1 domain span 2 sites. So it can be a little bit confusing. We're going to get there. I can apply a policy to a site. If that site has 3 domains, all 3 domains will get that policy. So it's just another container. Think of it as sites. So I am not affecting, when I open up this utility, I'm not looking at a domain. I'm looking at the forest. If I have 4 sites, I would see all 4 sites. So this is a utility that's on every DC that can see all the sites. I will run into problems, potential problems, if I use the wrong authentication. Which user account should we be using to deal with this? The enterprise admin. Now listen, if I was dealing with 2 DCs in the same site and the same domain, I could use that domain admin, no problem. But if I was going to move things between 2 domains, I definitely need to be the enterprise admin. Okay? So just keep in mind this works well. You don't have issues if you're as enterprise admin. Okay, that's it, guys, for today. I'm going to call it lesson 1. And, I didn't hit record. No, just kidding.